My name is Ivy Mercer. I'm 33 years old. 2 weeks before my parents' 35th wedding anniversary, my mother called and said something that made everything in me come to a stop. I wasn't allowed to come. Not because we had argued, not because I had done anything wrong, just that I shouldn't be there. My mother spoke very gently, as if she was asking for something completely reasonable. Parker was bringing Celeste to meet the family. The Holloways were very prestigious. They funded museums, they moved in art circles, they lived in a world where everything had to be perfect. And Parker didn't want to have to explain why his younger sister worked with flowers for a living. My mother paused for a moment, then asked, "You understand?" "Right." I said, "I understand." I didn't tell her that the Holloway family had already paid my company this year. I didn't tell her that Celeste had been working directly with me for months, sending over designs, going through every detail. And I didn't tell her that in just 2 weeks, in a room filled with lights and the very people Parker wanted to impress, my name would appear in front of hundreds of them. They thought they were hiding a florist from the family table. They didn't realize they had just crossed out the one person that entire room would soon be standing up to applaud. If this story resonates with you, stay until the end. And if you've ever been underestimated by the very people who were supposed to understand you the most, leave a comment, hit like, and subscribe to support the channel. I want to hear your story, and tell me what time it is and where you're watching from. Now let's move on to the next part. Some stories don't begin with a single shock. They begin with small moments repeated long enough to feel normal. 11 years ago, when I was 22, I told my family I wasn't going to submit my application for an MBA. I had already been accepted. Everything was ready. All I had to do was sign. But I chose a different direction. I enrolled in the Savannah Institute of Design, majoring in floral design and event space styling. I made it clear I wanted to build a career around creating beauty, not spreadsheets. My father didn't get angry. He just stayed quiet longer than usual, then asked if I was sure. My mother didn't argue directly. She just said it wasn't a stable career. Parker laughed, a short laugh, like I had said something that didn't need to be debated. Then they moved on to other people. The Hanson's daughter had just been accepted into medical school. Mr. Lewis's son was interning at a major law firm. Those conversations repeated often enough that I understood exactly where I stood in that picture. Family dinners became a fixed pattern. Parker was always asked first how his job was going, who his new clients were, what his numbers looked like that quarter, what his next move would be. My father asked in detail. My mother listened, both of them fully engaged as if his story was the center of the table. When it came to me, the question was always the same. How are the flowers going, honey? No one asked what I was learning, what I was experimenting with, or why I had chosen this path. I started with small things, assisting at a studio outside the city, cleaning, sorting flowers, learning how to keep them alive in different conditions. I learned how to look at an empty space and imagine what it could become. I did my first wedding on a very small budget. I drove the van myself, built every structure, took everything down after the guests left. When I told my family I had my first paying client, my mother said that was good, as long as I could take care of myself. In my second year, clients started coming back. People who had hired me referred me to their friends. I was mentioned in a local magazine, a short feature on emerging designers. I printed it out, brought it home, placed it on the table. My mother skimmed it and said it was nice. My father asked how many copies the magazine printed. Parker said nothing. He was on his phone. I didn't stop. I kept taking on more work, testing new ideas, changing how I approached things. I began to understand that floral design wasn't just about arranging something pretty, it was about shaping how a space felt. I learned how to work with light, with materials, with the way people move through a room. But at the table, the question never changed. There was one person who saw me differently: my grandmother. She didn't use big words, didn't talk about careers or success. She placed an old glass vase on the table, handed me wildflowers, and told me to try. She never corrected me when I got it wrong. She just asked what I saw. Before she passed, she left me a small pair of earrings. They weren't valuable, but she said one day I would need something to remind me why I started. The years after that moved in a clear direction. I worked more, learned more, built everything step by step. My family was still there, with the same way of seeing me. No one opposed me anymore, but no one truly understood what I was doing either. I stopped bringing my story to the table. I spoke less, worked more. At some point, I realized it no longer surprised me. No one in my family asked what I had built, not because they didn't have time, but because they didn't think it was worth asking. They didn't hate me. They just never saw what I did as something worth understanding. Years later, I stood inside Mercer Stem House, the studio I had built from nothing. The schedule was fully booked for the month. The team moved in structured shifts. Everything ran on a system I had created. That afternoon, I was finishing a suspended installation for a large event, checking each connection, each layer of structure. My phone vibrated. My mother. She rarely called during the week. I picked up. She went straight to the point. "Your father's anniversary will be held at the house. Parker is bringing Celeste to meet the family officially. The Holloways will be there too. It's the first time both families are meeting." I said. "I know." She continued. "Parker wants the evening to feel polished. Their family pays close attention to first impressions, to how everything is presented. He doesn't want anything that could make the atmosphere uncomfortable." I said nothing. I waited. She went on, more slowly. "Parker thinks it would be better this year to keep it small, just the people who fit that setting." She didn't say my name, but she didn't need to. I asked, "Am I not family?" She answered immediately, "Of course you are, but Parker just wants everything to look right for the first meeting." She paused, then added, "Your work might be difficult to explain to people like the Holloways." I asked, "Difficult how?" On the other end, she stayed quiet longer than usual. I didn't push. Finally, she said it. "Parker said you work with scissors, with wire, with things that aren't appropriate to bring into a dinner with people like them. It's not easy to explain in a night like that. It might give them the wrong impression about our family." I asked, "The wrong impression of what?" She lowered her voice. "That we are not on the same level." That answer was clear enough. I stood inside my own studio, where every project had a plan, where every contract carried real value, where I was responsible for an entire team. But in their version, everything was reduced to a simple image. She added one more thing. "Parker doesn't want them to see his younger sister in an apron." I didn't ask anything else. I just said, "So I'm not invited." She quickly corrected, "It's not that you're not invited, it's just that this time it would be better to keep things comfortable. Next year will be different. Or we can meet separately, just the two of us. Maybe lunch next weekend." I said, "Okay." The call ended like every other one, no argument, no further explanation. Everything returned to silence. I put my phone down. The space around me remained the same. The designs, the orders, the schedule already set. Nothing here needed to be explained in a way that was easier to understand. I went back to the work in front of me, finishing the last details of the structure. The work didn't stop. Only one thing had changed. I was no longer the one they forgot to ask about. I was the one they chose to hide. Mercer Stem House didn't appear overnight. It was built over time. In the first year, I rented a small warehouse on the edge of Savannah. No sign, no regular clients, just a few metal tables, an old refrigerator, and a used truck. I did everything myself. I sourced flowers early in the morning, sorted them, preserved them, designed arrangements, transported them, installed everything on site, then stayed to clean up at the end. There were no large contracts, just small orders, personal events with limited budgets. When I told my family I had opened my own place, my father asked how much the rent was, then told me to be careful. My mother nodded and said as long as I didn't put myself in a difficult situation. Parker asked if I had stable clients yet, then moved on to his own work. In the second year, I had my first wedding large enough to need help. That's when Nina Salazar came in. She had years of experience in the industry, understood the pace, and knew how to keep things running smoothly. We didn't talk much about big goals. We focused on doing each job well. One satisfied client led to another. We started getting bookings in advance, no longer waiting for random calls. When I told my family I had hired my first employee, my mother said that was good, as long as I managed my costs. My father asked if I provided insurance for staff. Parker said good luck. In the third year, we landed our first corporate contract, a multi-day event that required full coordination from design to execution. It was the first time I handled that scale, with tight timelines and higher standards. We delivered exactly as required. After that, the client referred us to others. Mercer Stem House started being mentioned in conversations I wasn't part of. I told my family business was improving. My mother said that was good. My father reminded me to take care of my health. Parker talked about an event in his field, and the table shifted back to him. In the fourth year, I moved into a larger space. We had more staff, a clearer system. Brooke Hensley joined as operations lead. She reorganized schedules, managed contracts, and allowed me to focus on design and direction. We began taking on more complex projects, not just flowers, but entire spatial experiences. I bought a small house with my own money. When my family visited, my mother said it was neat and suitable. My father checked the equipment and asked how much I had invested. Those were the first signs of interest, but still surface level. By the fifth year, everything had changed. Mercer Stem House was no longer a small warehouse. We had a team of nearly 20 people, a full calendar, contracts booked months in advance. Our clients included large-scale events, fundraising galas, high-end weddings, spaces that required complete design from the ground up. Each contract carried enough value to sustain the entire operation behind it. Every week, we handled multiple projects at once, each with its own requirements, its own standards. There was no room for error. During that time, another project came in. Celeste Holloway, an event director for an art foundation, reached out to Mercer Stem House. She needed a team capable of handling a gala with high aesthetic and organizational demands. We met at the studio, discussed ideas, space, and how people would experience the evening. She worked with precision, clarity. She knew exactly what she wanted. I responded with designs, structured proposals. We worked directly together for months. Celeste knew my name. She knew I was the one leading on site. But in her view, I was the creative lead, not the person behind the entire system. She didn't ask, and I didn't explain. The work was completed exactly as agreed. Meanwhile, somewhere else, Parker told a different story. He described me as the one who didn't succeed in the family. He said I worked in something unclear, unstable, something that couldn't be compared to what he did. He reduced everything I had built into one simple phrase: just flowers. There was someone who saw it differently. Julian Ashcroft, a well-known curator in the art world, had worked with us on a project. He didn't say much, but during one review he said something I never forgot. He said, "I don't arrange flowers, I construct memory." He said my work isn't about materials, it's about what people remember when they leave a space. The projects that followed came from referrals like that. No heavy promotion, No long explanations. One client led to another. Mercer Stem House began appearing on lists for major events. At some point, we received a nomination for an industry award. Not something I built the company for, but a clear milestone. I read the email, forwarded it to Nina and Brooke, then kept working as usual. I didn't tell my family. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I knew it wouldn't be understood the way it needed to be. Everything kept moving. Projects came in, were executed, then completed. The schedule filled up. The team grew. The system expanded. Nothing changed overnight, just small steps repeated long enough to become something undeniable. From the outside, people see a woman standing among flowers, adjusting details, refining compositions. They see the most visible part of the work. They don't see the contracts, the numbers, the decisions, the people behind every project. They see a woman standing among flowers. They don't see the one standing behind the entire system. The anniversary came without any change to my schedule. No reminder call, no backup plan, no one asking what I would do that evening. Everything unfolded exactly the way they had arranged it, just without me in it. I woke up like any other day, made coffee, reviewed my task list. Mercer Stem House had an order for early next week, a corporate event with clear requirements and a tight timeline. I drove to the studio earlier than usual, not because I had to, but because it was the only place where I didn't have to think about what was happening somewhere else. The space was familiar. Orders were labeled by date, materials already prepared. I started with the basics, checking flower quantities, adjusting a few details in the designs, updating the delivery schedule. Everything had structure. Everything made sense. Nothing needed guessing. I spent most of the morning finishing sample pieces. Some options were kept, others were discarded. There was nothing personal about those decisions, just choosing what worked and what didn't. Around midday, I ate a simple meal at the studio. No one sitting across from me, no conversation to maintain. My phone was beside me. The screen lit up once. A message from Parker. "Hope you're doing okay." Just one line. No explanation, no mention of that night. No sign that he understood what had happened. A message that maintained form, but changed nothing. I read it, then put the phone down. I didn't reply. The afternoon continued as planned. I reviewed orders, confirmed with suppliers, finalized task assignments for the team the next day. These things didn't require emotion, only precision. At that same time, somewhere else, my family was sitting together. A carefully prepared table, conversations shaped to make a good impression. Parker would talk about his work. My mother would follow. My father would ask more. Celeste would listen. Everything would unfold smoothly, with no gaps to fill. No one needed to explain why I wasn't there. By the end of the day, I cleaned the workspace, materials returned to their places, orders marked and ready. I turned off the lights, locked the studio, and left after dark. Back home, I opened my laptop and continued reviewing a contract for next month. Numbers, terms, details that needed confirmation. The work continued, independent of a night I wasn't part of. There was no moment that forced me to stop. Nothing that demanded an immediate reaction. Everything moved like a normal day, except I knew I was no longer in the same place. I wasn't sitting at that table, not hearing the familiar questions, not answering the way they expected. No awkward silence, no topics being redirected. For the first time, I wasn't at that table pretending everything was fine. If you've ever been in a moment like that, where you were quietly pushed out without explanation, hit like to support, leave a comment and share your thoughts, and subscribe to follow what happens next, because in the next part, nothing will be able to stay hidden anymore. 2 weeks after that night, I stood in front of the Savannah Grand Hotel. The building was lit, cars pulling in and out, guests stepping out in formal attire. It was the industry's annual gala, where organizers, vendors, and sponsors gathered in one place. I had confirmed my attendance earlier as part of the nominee list. No one in my family knew. I wore a simple black dress, nothing excessive. On my ears were my grandmother's earrings. I didn't change anything else. I didn't need to become a different version of myself for this night. Inside, the room was arranged with large round tables, the lighting focused toward the stage. I found my seat, sat among others in the industry. Conversations around me were about projects, plans, upcoming work. I responded when needed, mostly listened. After a while, I saw them. At a table near the front, Parker sat next to Celeste. My mother was on the other side, my father across from them. They were speaking with others at the table, likely partners or guests. None of them looked toward me. None of them knew I was in the same room. Celeste wore a deep blue dress, her hair neatly tied back. She was saying something. Parker nodded. My mother smiled the way she does when she wants to make a good impression. My father stayed quiet, adding a short comment now and then. Everything unfolded exactly as I expected. The program began. The host stepped on stage, introduced the event, the categories. Applause followed each segment. Early awards were announced, names called, short speeches given. I kept my eyes on the stage, but I still noticed movement at their table. Parker leaned toward Celeste, saying something. My mother watched the stage, focused. There was no sign they were ready for what was coming. When it came to the category for design and event production, the lights dimmed. The screen behind the stage lit up. The host spoke about criteria, selection, notable names. Then the slide appeared. The first name, then the second, then the third. Ivy Mercer, founder, Mercer Stem House. My name was clear on the screen, alongside images of our work from the past year. Nothing unclear, nothing to misinterpret. I didn't turn around immediately, but I knew that moment had reached their table. Celeste noticed first. She looked at the screen longer than usual, then down at the program in her hand. The connection happened quickly. She turned to Parker, said something short. Parker looked up, followed where she pointed. The change in his face didn't need explanation. A pause, then recognition. My mother followed that movement, her eyes fixed on the screen. She said nothing, just stared. My father was a moment slower, but once he looked, he didn't look away. At my table, no one noticed what was happening across the room. They were reading the program, quietly discussing the nominees. To them, this was just another category. The host continued, describing each nominee. When it came to me, they mentioned Mercer Stem House, the projects, the way we built spaces and experiences. It was read like any other introduction. For my table, it was information. For theirs, it was the first time hearing the full story. The envelope was opened. The pause lasted just long enough. The winner was announced. Ivy Mercer. Applause spread across the room, not loud or sudden, but steady, enough to carry. I stood. No hesitation. I stepped away from the table, walked down the aisle toward the stage. The pace didn't matter, only that it was steady. As I passed their table, I glanced once. Parker was no longer looking at the stage. He was looking at me. No clear expression, just stillness. My mother stayed in the same position, her hands on the table, her eyes fixed on me. My father sat upright, silent. Celeste wasn't looking at me. She was looking at Parker. I stepped onto the stage. The host handed me the award, shook my hand, stepped aside. The lights focused where I stood. I held the microphone. There was no need for a long explanation. I spoke about the beginning, about building from nothing. I spoke about my team, the people who showed up every day, who kept everything running as it should. I spoke about value not coming from immediate recognition, but from continuing even when no one is paying attention. I paused, then said the final line. Most people see the flowers. Very few understand what it takes to build the stem. I didn't look toward them when I said it. There was no need. The applause returned, stronger this time. I nodded, thanked them, stepped off the stage. Back at my table, my phone lit up. A new message. My mother's name. I didn't open it. The night continued. More awards, more names. Everything followed the program. But something had shifted, and it couldn't return to what it was before. In the same room, under the same lights, with the same sound, two versions of one person had collided. This time, no one needed an explanation. The program ended. Guests began leaving their tables, small conversations forming across the lobby. I stood, exchanged a few quick words with partners, received handshakes, congratulations, questions about upcoming projects. Mercer Stem House was mentioned more in those few minutes than my family had ever asked about in years. I hadn't even left the area when my mother walked over. My father followed behind her. They stopped in front of me, close enough not to draw attention, but too close to pretend we hadn't seen each other. My mother spoke first. She said they didn't know. She repeated it twice, as if saying it again could change what it meant. My father stood beside her, not interrupting, just looking at me, waiting. I said, "I told you." Not in the way they wanted to hear, but I had. Years ago, at those dinners they considered normal. I told them when I started about my first clients, the projects I took on. They never asked more, and that was where it ended. My father asked why I didn't explain it more clearly. I asked, how much clearer? A registered company, a hired team, signed contracts, completed projects. None of that needed to be presented like a report to be real. But if no one asks, there is nowhere for it to go. My mother said she didn't think it had become this big. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't have one, but because it wouldn't change anything that had already happened. A brief silence settled between the three of us. No one rushed to fill it. My father said he was proud. He said he should have said it sooner. It wasn't complicated, just a simple sentence, but it came late. I nodded, acknowledging it, not fully accepting it. I said I needed to get back to my team. The conversation ended there. No clear conclusion, no promises, just a pause. I had taken a few steps when Parker called my name. He stood near the bar, far enough from the table that others wouldn't hear. He said he didn't know. I said, "You never asked." He said it wasn't how I thought, that he didn't mean for things to turn out this way, that he just wanted the night to go smoothly. I said, "You got what you wanted, a night without me." He went quiet for a few seconds, then said he didn't think it would go this far. He said he didn't know how much my work had grown, that he thought I was still doing small things. I said, "That's because you chose to believe that. Not because the information wasn't there, but because you didn't need it to keep your version of me intact. A simpler version is easier to accept than a complicated one." He said Celeste hadn't spoken to him since my name appeared on the screen, that things were becoming difficult. I said, "That's not my problem." That answer didn't need anything more. There was no responsibility for me to fix what he had created. Parker didn't say anything else. The conversation ended without change. I left the area, heading toward the exit. Near the main lobby, Celeste was standing there, as if waiting. She said my name. Nothing else. Just my name. She said she needed to talk. Her voice was steady, not rushed. We moved to a quieter corner, away from the crowd. Celeste said she was sorry. Not as a formality, but as something she had thought through after understanding what had happened. She said Parker told her I didn't have a clear career, that I wasn't stable, that I only did temporary work. She said she believed it, because she had no reason not to. She said when she worked with me, she saw someone organized, someone with standards, someone with a clear way of working. But she never connected the two. I said, "You didn't need to connect anything. You just needed to look at the work." Celeste nodded. She said she realized that too late. She said she didn't accept being given false information, especially about someone she had worked with directly. She said that didn't match how she judged people. Then she made an offer. She said next year her foundation would host a larger series of events, on a bigger scale. She wanted Mercer Stem House to take the lead. She said she would send the details if I was interested. I said I would consider it. There was no urgency in that answer. Work was still work, independent of what had just happened. Before leaving, Celeste added one more thing. She said she understood why I didn't talk much about myself, not because I had nothing to say, but because I didn't need to convince anyone. Then she walked away, back toward her table. Parker was still there, but the distance between them was clearer now. I continued toward the exit. No one stopped me again. Outside, the air was cooler, quieter. The noise from inside faded. My phone buzzed again. Another message from my mother, shorter this time. She asked if we could talk. I didn't reply immediately. Not because I didn't want to, but because there was nothing left to say in that moment. Everything that needed to be said had already been laid out, in a way that couldn't be ignored. For years, I was the one no one asked about. That night, I was the one no one could ignore. They saw me. But it was too late for that night. 4 days after the gala, I received an email from my father. It was sent early, before I even got to the studio. The subject line was short. Nothing unusual. The message was direct. No detours. He said he had been thinking about what happened. He said he realized he didn't know what my work actually was, didn't know how I had built it, and that it was his fault. He said he was used to understanding Parker's job, so it was easy for him to ask questions. But with me, he didn't understand, so he never asked. He said he was proud, but he should have said that years ago. At the end, he signed his name simply, no title, no distance. I read it, then set my phone down. I didn't reply right away. That same afternoon, my mother texted and asked if we could meet. I chose a cafe near the studio, a specific time. She arrived early. Sitting in the corner, a cup of coffee untouched in front of her. When I sat down, she thanked me for coming. She didn't start with an apology. She started with an explanation. She said she had worked in an office for many years, always in a position that went unnoticed. She said she believed a career that was easy to explain would make a person more respected, better treated. She said when I chose a different path, she worried I would go through what she had gone through, or worse. She said she didn't realize that while trying to protect me, she had failed to see what I had actually built. I told her I didn't need a job that was easy to explain. I needed a job I could stand on. I said I didn't need to be accepted in spite of what I do. I needed to be respected because of it. She stayed quiet for a moment, then said she understood. Not from the beginning, but she was trying. I told her I would come back to family dinners, but not the way it used to be. I set one condition. If anyone at that table treated my work as something lesser, something not worth talking about, I would leave immediately, and I wouldn't come back again. She nodded. No negotiation. I added one more thing. I wouldn't come alone. I would bring Nina with me. She had been there from the beginning. She was part of Mercer Stem House, and I wasn't going to let her sit in a place where she had to explain herself. My mother agreed. We ended the meeting there. No big promises, just clear terms. Later that day, Parker called. I didn't pick up. He left a voicemail. It wasn't long. He said he was wrong. He said he compared things in a way that benefited him. He said he didn't think I would go this far. He said he was jealous, not of money or recognition, but of the fact that I chose a path and stayed with it. He said Celeste had given the ring back. He didn't explain further, just said it was the result of what he had said and done. I listened once, then deleted it. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I didn't need to keep it. The next holiday, I drove to my parents' house with Nina. No special preparation. We brought a dish, the way Nina always does. The house looked the same. My mother opened the door, greeted Nina by name, didn't ask anything else. My father was in the kitchen setting the table. Parker was in the living room, stood up when we walked in. No handshake, no long words, just a nod. We sat down. The atmosphere wasn't very different at first, but the way the conversation began was. My father asked first. A specific question, not a general one. He asked about a project, about the process, how I structured the team, how I managed timelines. I answered the way I answer clients. No simplification. My mother asked about sourcing, how I chose materials, how I worked with suppliers. She didn't interrupt, didn't redirect. Nina joined in when needed, explaining parts of the operations. No one treated her like an outsider. Parker didn't say much. He ate, listened, nodded occasionally. No questions, no comments. His silence was different, not dismissive, just empty of anything to add. The dinner ended without conflict. Nothing needed to be fixed immediately. Not perfect, but clear enough to show something had shifted. In the weeks that followed, I continued working as usual. Mercer Stem House took on new contracts, new projects. Nina and Brooke kept the system running. Nothing in the work changed because of one night. One morning, my mother texted and asked if they could come see the studio. Not just to look, but to understand. I said yes. They came early, before clients arrived. The team was already preparing for a large event. I walked them through each area, explained each part, not as a presentation, but as I do every day. My father stayed longer in the design area, looking at sketches, sample builds. He asked how I took an idea from paper to execution. My mother watched how the team worked together, how everything connected. No one said they were surprised. No one said they didn't expect it. Just more direct, more specific questions. When they left, my mother said one simple thing. She said she understood why I never needed to explain. After that, the messages started coming at different times, not just weekends. My mother asked about projects. My father asked about progress, not to check, but to know. The questions weren't perfect, but they were real. Parker didn't call again. No more messages. The distance between us was still there, but no longer hidden behind a false story. A few weeks later, Celeste sent an email. She didn't mention the past, just details about a new series of events, clear requirements, specific scope. Mercer Stem House was listed first. I responded through the usual process. Everything continued, but it wasn't the same anymore. They used to hide me out of embarrassment. Now they ask when they can come by the studio. It took a stage and a room full of strangers for them to finally see me. If you've stayed with this story until the end, hit like to support the journey, leave a comment to share your thoughts or your own story, and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Thank you for listening all the way through.